Welcome, Noah, Ilana, and David. And thank you for being so willing and open to share your experiences with the community tonight. Thank you, of course, to the researchers for the work you are doing. Scientists, no doubt, understand that everything they do is about the people affected. And so it was an extraordinarily generous offer from an extraordinary family that we are able to complement the rich scientific knowledge shared tonight with some very real world human understanding of addiction and recovery. So thank you three all so much for being here. I'm going to start by asking why you three, and I'm going to ask all three of you, why you chose to share your story tonight. And you weren't asked, I don't think. I think you jumped forward and volunteered. Can I ask you each why this is important to you? Noah, can I start with you?
Yep. Can you hear me? Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, over the last 18 months, I've turned my life around. And a big part of staying in the middle of that is giving back and wanting to make an impact in someone else's life that, was in my place in addiction, and just, to raise awareness about addiction and to kind of destigmatize addiction and make it more normalized for your average conversation, so that addicts don't feel shamed and embarrassed and hide in the shadows in their addiction. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Similar story for me. I have felt passionate through our journey since we learned of Noah's addiction and commenced on his recovery journey with treatment, and our own recovery journey, which we'll explain to you along the way. That we need to draw this disease out from the dark corners of society. We need to talk about it. We need to face it. We need to face it and recognize that it's there, help each other, be a community that can talk openly about this and remove the stigma and remove the shame.
Echoing what my beautiful men said, I just want to add that for me it was incredibly important from the moment we found out about Noah's disease that I would be a voice, so that nobody coming next would be alone and have nobody to talk to, so that any parent who is curious or concerned about their child knows they have a family to come to help guide their way, because this isn't going anywhere and we need people leading the way. So.
Noah, I'd like to ask you to share briefly your experience with addiction, how it began, how it progressed, and how you came to realize and accept that you need help. But we have discussed how your individual experience, the specific drugs that you took, the physical and emotional reasons that you became addicted, in some ways don't matter, that every experience is different, and every person with an addiction in some ways ends up in the same place. But especially speaking with your parents, I think we felt that a little bit of explanation about the trajectory that you took would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like on this topic I could go on for hours about my story, and like you said, the specifics of like the drugs that I took aren't necessarily the most important part. I think that an addict's journey is like a downhill spiral, and it's pretty personally unique to each addict's experience. So I think that it's important to focus on the common denominators, which ultimately lead to unmanageability. And so for me, in terms of behaviors, like even before I did any substances and or used drugs or alcohol, I at a very young age was behaving in certain ways that kind of indicated addiction. Like I was lying a lot. I was really obsessed with like fitting in and impressing people, and so I like was a compulsive liar and had a reputation of being, you know, a pathological liar, and in result, like I lost a lot of friends. And so when it came time to being the age of going to high school, I went to a high school where I didn't know anyone, and I had an opportunity to build a new social network, and gravitated towards people that were, you know, skipping school and experimenting with drugs and alcohol. And so when I had my first experience experimenting, I, you know, fell in love right away. Like it was a moment of, you know, this is what was missing the whole time. And from that experimentation stage, it turned into like a dependency very fast, and essentially, you know, became a priority for me. All I did was, you know, focus on doing drugs, and like I'm talking at the beginning, is it was just marijuana and alcohol, but it took over from my school priorities, my responsibilities, my family relationships and friendships, and started to cause me to isolate. And yeah, it progressed through high school. You know, I started selling marijuana in high school, and I really embraced the rebellious reputation. And I was, you know, started experimenting with harder drugs like MDMA, and like I said, I'm not going to get too far into the specifics, but essentially, I would always set a limit, like a boundary for myself of like, this is as far as I'm going to experiment, and eventually I would just push back past that boundary and continue to, you know, push the bar higher and higher until I was doing drugs to the point where I, you know, felt like I was beyond repair, and you know, had no hope for like a brighter future, and was damaging my relationships with friends and family. And yeah, that's what led me to my rock bottom.
Can you tell us about the moment that you realized that you wanted help?
Yeah, I got to a point where I, you know, thought I wouldn't say it was like I had no will to live, but I just felt like I was, you know, hopeless and beyond repair, and just had no vision of a solution. And I knew that with my family knowing, and like I had a lot of friends who, some of them are here tonight, like were starting to pick up on where I was at in life and with addiction, and were suggesting to go get help and go to treatment. So, you know, I reached out to my parents, and we got me into treatment. Yeah.
Wow.
Take,
Oh,
take the
really?
microphone.
Do you have a question?
I can give an answer.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that Noah reached out and said, I need help. It was that we found him. One of those mommy moments of my son's in trouble, I need to go find him. And I listened to that instinct, and we went to find him. He was staying at my brother's house, who was out of town. And we walked into a reality that we would never in a million years have imagined our son would be in, knowing there was some indication that there was a problem, but we thought it was under control, even though those instincts were there. And we found him, and it was immediate. My son is an addict. I don't want to live like this, is what he said. We said, what do you want to do? Treatment. We called our friend Connor, and he was in treatment 2 days later, and here we are. So it wasn't, most kids are not going to say I'm in trouble. You're very lucky if they do. Most kids are going to show you they're in trouble, and we don't know what that looks like unless you have addiction in your family, which we didn't. And if you don't have anybody to go to say, what is this? Is this maybe a problem? You end up rock bottom.
Going back a little chronologically, what did Noah's addiction, what impact did that have on your family? What did that look like from your angle as parents?
I'll try to be brief. Noah being our oldest, we were sort of had an expectation of what our family would look like and what relationships would look like. And Noah kind of started to slip away, but everybody was like, it's teenagers, right? They're all smoking weed, and they're all,
prioritizing things outside the family and prioritizing their peers. But it was really those first friends that he brought home from that new school, which were so far from the boys he had grown up with, that I knew instinctively, like that moment of instinct was, I think we have a problem. But Noah was very masterful at keeping some of the things in place. It wasn't until, I mean, it really wasn't until now, having our boy clean and back, did I see what was missing along the way. Those lines that you hear, that drugs take your kids away from you, that is true. They do. It does. It took him away from his brothers. He didn't prioritize his family the way he had up until, he was 14 or 15. He prioritized everything but. And only when we had the next two kids did we see, wow, he really isn't okay. That really isn't normal. There really is something wrong. But kids are in denial. Kids want to, manipulate and tell you they're okay when they're not, and be believed.
I will add to that the power of denial is remarkable, because I reflect on the years where we didn't know there was a problem, but there really was clearly a problem. We were in total denial, but it was a bit chaotic, a bit more chaotic than I think other families around. And it had all these features of these addictive behaviors like lying and being dramatic and so on. So lots of red flags were always popping up. There were even times where I asked Noah, is there a drug problem? And Noah would react very violently with, "Are you kidding me? How could you, accuse me of this? I'll go for a drug test," and things like that. So I'm immediately, "Okay, calm down. It's all good." So there was a lot of chaos in the family. There was damage being done over the years that progressed with the progression of the disease, and we're just grateful that he found treatment and recovery.
Noah, kids are going to experiment with substances. What would you like them to know?
Yeah, I've put a little bit of thought into that and kind of expected to see more kids here. I don't know, that's just me in my head, I guess. But also, while the presentations were happening and I kind of realized that, I also realized that it's not just kids that are addicts, and everybody knows someone that could potentially be an addict, and we all really care about our younger generation. And I would say that I thought a lot about indicators for me at that age, which was a lot about dependency. I think that differentiates a lot from, there's a fine line in between experimenting and dependency. And I know that ideally I'd want to come up here and say don't do drugs, but that's not realistic. And I know that teenagers these days, and myself when I was a teenager, experimented. So certain indicators are, if you're using and you can't stop, like you don't know when to shut it off, like for my experience, people were experimenting on the weekends and I would continue through the week. And when I had intentions of slowing down, I couldn't do it. Certain behaviors, like if you're lying, stealing, isolating, neglecting responsibilities, that's a pretty good indicator. I would say also, if you're suppressing your emotions, if you're using it as a coping mechanism, that's not experimental. And that's something that, I'm only speaking from my experience. That's definitely something that I did. And I think the more you don't address your feelings and you don't process them, with a clean or without using drugs, the more they intensify as you suppress them. And that's, I think, contributes to the trajectory of the progression of the disease as well, because the drugs become harder because you need more to suppress more feelings. So yeah, that's a few things from me.
Alana and David, you spoke about the stigma. That's one of the reasons you're here. And that, I think, is a factor in, I think you knew that there were other people who knew that Noah was in trouble, but they didn't come to you with that information. What would your advice be to people who, in a situation like that, who think either it's not my place, um, it's uh, it's not something we talk about.
Yeah, it is your place, 100%, to say something to somebody that you're concerned about. Risk the friendship, risk the relationship, risk the work relationship. Like, do what you need to do to get attention to the people that, like David said, are in denial. We were in denial. People are in denial when their children or their loved ones, parents, siblings, friends, are in trouble. People are in denial until you know. You don't want to know. And if I had had one person say I've been there, I think, would you like to have a conversation? I would have taken it. And, that's what I want to be for somebody. That's what we've been for people since this began. And risk the relationships. Don't, or you're going to risk the one that you love. Take that chance, be the whistleblower, be the friend that goes to the parents, be the friend that tells the principal. And like, this is what you should tell your children, right? Like, tell the principal who the kid that you're worried about is, because otherwise it gets lost. Nobody wants to say anything, and telling a principal there's a problem with drugs in your school is not the way to do it. The kid will not know they're in trouble, and it will escalate. That's pretty much it for me.
I think you covered it off very well. I don't think there's much I can add other than to put out a disclaimer that we don't hold anyone responsible for not sharing with us earlier. I mean, we're in the same boat. You see things that you question, and there's a tendency to not want to reach out. And I think from what we've learned in the last couple of years, it's worth risking, it's worth reaching out and having a conversation. Just like this is an open dialogue about addiction, we want to encourage that everywhere. Draw it out of the dark corners of society and into the light.
Excellent. Essentially, same question from the other side, Noah. Um, do you think it would have made a difference if people had come to you more forcefully? Whether your friends had gone right to your parents when they first threatened to, if your parents had come to you and confronted you more forcefully, would it have made a difference? Were you ready to hear?
It's a really conflicting question for me. I personally, with my experience, I went so far out of my way to protect my addiction. And if anyone tried to get in the way, they would get gaslit or they would just get cut out of my life. And I don't, again, like my parents as well, like I don't blame anyone for not trying to intervene. And ultimately, like I did whatever I could to protect that information from getting to my parents. But on that note, like what my parents are saying, like I think it's important to just realize that like this is life or death. And, the longer I'm, regardless in recovery or addiction, like we're losing more and more people, and we can't afford to, preserve our, like the trust in our relationships and not want to like undercut people just to not, overstep a boundary when really you're like, you could be potentially saving a life, right? And like the drug supply is so toxic. I've seen it with my own eyes, and it's really dangerous. So I agree. It's like, back to your question, I don't really dwell on the past and what could have been different, but in order to maybe make a difference in someone else's life, I definitely think the earlier you can intervene, the earlier you can get an addict potentially to move towards a solution.
For families who are experiencing addiction or who think they may be, what is your advice? And especially if they reach out, is help available?
Yes, definitely help is available. Addiction is an isolation disease, and the only way through is community and coming together. And there's an unbelievable amount of help There's also a lack of resources. How do I say this in a way that, there's a lack of awareness of what the problem looks like, but once the problem is identified, there's an immense amount of help available. There is incredible treatment. There are incredible humans in this room who are in the business of saving lives. And there are resources that kind of ripple them. Once you start, it just happens, and the resources come. There are interventionists, there are addiction counselors, there is treatment. Nobody is alone, nobody will be alone, but you have to take that first step and ask that first question, and be courageous. And then it spitfires from there, I think.
I'll just throw out a thought or two that are maybe counterintuitive, as they certainly were to us at first. And that is that you can't force someone into treatment. Interesting political dialogue going on right now about involuntary treatment, but an addict needs to be ready to surrender and volunteer to have the treatment be effective. But what the parents can do, what the families can do, is start to learn about the disease and how it affects you and how it affects your family. Start to learn about how you need to look after yourself in the process. You need to start to reduce the chaos in your life and in your house. You need to start to have boundaries with the addict, with the addicted one, and you need to get to meetings, and we can help talking about that. But in our case, we went to Naranon and to the family group at the treatment center where Noah was, and it was so important for us to find community with people who had shared experience and could not only share their experience but their strength and their hope, and that was really key to our own healing, our own recovery, which is equally important, or it coexists with Noah's recovery.
And you made an analogy of the oxygen mask on a plane, that you have to take care of yourself first before you can take care of your family member.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a relevant analogy, because when you start to look after yourself, start to recognize that you can reduce the chaos around you, start to establish some boundaries, which are rules for the addicted one, but also protective boundaries for yourself. When you start to put those things into place, it helps for all the other pieces to come together.
I just want to add that most of the time, often, the parent will, the person that's not the addict will do the work to heal, and the addict will come next, right? I always say that, like, you go first to the person who's concerned about their child. You go first, you get the help, and it helps you to understand the disease. And if you understand the disease, you know what to feed and what not to feed. You know how to enable or not. If you're going to just wait for the addict to wake up and want to fix this, and for us, it did all come at the same time. But the people that are concerned, like, do your research, talk to people, get the information before you know what you're dealing with. You'll be much more empowered.
Noah, do you want to comment on that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, from my experience, when I was in addiction, especially towards the end, I thought, I was really isolated and really alone, and felt like nobody would understand what I was going through, and nobody could help me. I wasn't too interested in the solution, to be honest, but that was a way my addiction justified staying in it. And when I did find, recovery and get clean, lo and behold, there was like an army of people that already loved me, and loved me till I could love myself. It's something we say in recovery a lot, and a lot of people in this room who I owe my life to, and yeah, like I can only speak for my experience, and I'm personally part of I'm part of a 12-step fellowship, and that's my version of recovery. And there's lots of different angles that you could go to in terms of the solution. But yeah, in terms of the broader picture of like, it's a family disease, like it's not just the addict; it affects the entire family. And um, in terms of speaking to the families, like, yeah, if you think that someone in your family is an addict, like, you have to, protect yourself. And unfortunately, like, this disease will um, cause harm, and you will, if it's hard to get in the way of an addiction, it's almost impossible. So, like my father said, like, it's up to the addict. If he or she wants to get clean, that's up to them. But you have to, protect yourself and set those boundaries. And I think it's important to educate yourself on addiction so that you can be able to, meet the addict where they are, and use that vocabulary that, like, isn't so known across the board. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Alana and David, in just 2 years, you've gone from what you described as being broken to being mentors to families who are just beginning the journey that you've been on. What have the silver linings been in this experience for you?
Getting our boy back is the only one that really matters. Giving him back to his brothers and his family and his grandparents and his friends, and bringing him into the light so that he can serve the darkness. I'm hearing now from a lot of mothers who are the mothers of the young men that he works with, and they're saying things about him that I haven't heard people say about my son since he was in grade 7. And again, I don't think you know what you're missing until you get it back, right? That old saying, don't know what you have till it's gone. It's true. I didn't know what was lost really until he's out in the light. And for us to lead the way for, we know 2 families who came through us to treatment, to recovery. So we are doing that flame of lighting the next family who also want to light the next family. So it doesn't stay with us. It inspires everybody. There are people in this room who are doing that. And if it was any other disease, we would all be like, do whatever you can. If it was cancer, do whatever you can. So we will do whatever we can. And regardless of what Noah chooses for the rest of his life, we are in this for the long haul. Recovery is our thing now. So you will not be getting rid of us.
I think Ilana speaks to the mama piece much better than I do. And every word she said is absolutely true. However, there are other blessings that come with us learning recovery. We have always been part of a beautiful community. Many of you are in the room tonight, but we have new communities. We have new community of recovery with other families that are going through similar things. And as I spoke to a few minutes ago, the shared experience, the strength and the hope that they feel at different stages of their own recoveries is a huge blessing. The fact that we can get together, when I first went to a family meeting at the door, at the treatment center he was at, I was resentful. It's like a Wednesday evening. I've just finished a full day at work. This is what I'm doing with my time now. He's in treatment and I'm going to meetings with a bunch of other families of addicts. Little did I know that it would be the most rewarding 90 minutes of our week every single week. It is a beautiful experience and it sounds strange as it comes out of my mouth, but it's a beautiful experience to share experiences and feel other people's strength and hope, and to now share our own with others in the room as well. So I could go on a long time. There's lots of blessings of recovery.
Our own, I mean, I think we are better humans than we've ever been in our lives. Like in our marriage, in our communities. We know we were isolated. We know we pulled back. We didn't know why. We understand it now, but we're better people. We're just better people. I was a, people pleasing, codependent addict myself, and I know that, and I am not that anymore. I am stronger. I am better, and the rewards are immense. From the darkness and despair has come abundance and light, and I know we're just getting started. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Noah, how has your life changed and how have your relationships changed in the last 2 years?
um, everything's changed, and it had to. And it took me a couple tries at recovery because I wasn't ready to change everything. I wanted my old life back in some ways, and I was told that doesn't work, and I had to figure that out myself. And I'm grateful to still be alive to have figured it out. But yeah, I mean, I went from a drug addict who couldn't go 5 minutes without using, and my life's done a complete 180. And I mean, the silver linings, like I could go on forever, but seeing my family grow is a huge one for me. Being part of my family again. Um, just I've changed career paths, and I work as I manage a sober living facility, giving back, and I'm studying addiction counseling. And I have God in my life. I'm happy. I love myself. Like, these are all things that are brand new to me. So I'm super grateful. And yeah, I want to keep talking about it so that more people can experience the same gifts.
David, did you want to say?
Oh.
I would just like to ask each of you if there is one thing that you would like everybody here tonight to take away from this conversation. What would you like it to be?
I mean, I just wanted, like, when I heard about this opportunity to speak, I went to high school here, and I love the Jewish community, and I wanted to take this opportunity to kind of, again, like, raise the awareness, remove the stigma, and being an addict doesn't mean you're on the downtown east side, and I think that a lot of people assume that and don't really look within, but it's among us, and it doesn't discriminate age, religion. Like, it's everywhere, and it's getting worse. And between the toxic drug supply and just the accessibility to drugs, like, it's concerning. And I'm lucky to still be alive, and I've lost a lot of friends to this disease. And I know that within this community we've lost quite a few people, and I just, it's really important to me to keep talking about it, and to normalize the discussion about addiction, and not allow these, not have addicts try to hide it and try to and feel shame and guilt and embarrassment, and yeah, honestly, like, if you are struggling with addiction, or if there's anything that any of us said, or something from my story that you resonate with or relate to, like, come talk to me. Like, there's a page with our with QR codes. Thank you. Like, scan it and you get my number, and just reach out, and we can have a chat, because like, you're putting yourself in danger being in addiction, and you're robbing yourself of an experience that, like, you get a life that you'd never imagine. So yeah, that's all from me.
There's not much more to add to that. I would say don't be afraid of talking about addiction. Be afraid of not talking about addiction. It's not going anywhere, and we have to normalize this conversation so that people can come and ask for help if they need it. So my hope from tonight is that each of you took one thing away that maybe may alert you to somebody you know. It may not be your family, right? It may be your neighbor. Your child may come to you and say they're concerned with a friend. One piece of information that may inspire you to go forward. Or, like Noah said, please, like, moms in the room, I've been there. Like, I get it. I not another child on my watch. So call me. And I know David feels the same way. And just that you're here listening is a miraculous blessing. So we thank you all for taking the time truly to be with us.
The 12-step programs, I'll just cover very briefly. Noah attends NA, or Narcotics Anonymous. There's a parallel program called Nar-Anon for family groups. And it's similar with AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and Al-Anon. But they're programs that call for, help me out here, attraction, not promotion. However, I'm going to promote for a second. And just mention that if you find yourself in a chaotic environment with chaos in your house, and you see lying and manipulation and these other signs of addiction, you see drug use, you see repeated drug use, don't hesitate to get yourself to a meeting. Reach out to us. We can point you in the right direction. Go to a meeting, try it out. You'll find community there. You'll find compassion. You'll find love. You'll find support and other people's experience that will help you get through those challenges. And I think we've covered it.
Thank you. Thank you three so much. I know that I speak clearly on behalf of everybody. That was an incredibly profound, moving conversation. Thank you three so much. You're an extraordinary family. We have time for a two questions. And there is a microphone out there, I think. The questions could be for the family or for the scientists. So we've got jumpers.
Fantastic. It's really wonderful to be here and hear you. I'm curious, this conversation is happening in a high school and in a school. Do you have anything to say to educators about what needs to happen within the Jewish community, within Jewish education, to be more supportive, perhaps, for people who are struggling this way?
Take that. Yes, I mean, I think that every school needs to have at least one staff member that's educated in the reality of addiction and what it really looks like. Because when we were struggling, we were told he's totally fine. There's nothing wrong. It's just a phase. And I believed that because I wanted to. So I think there needs to be a lot more hands on deck with people who really understand the true signs of addiction. And again, not being afraid to call the parents to say we have a problem.
No, my boy. What do you say to your old friends from very way back when, before this started, and who may have seen you go through it and didn't know, and who are no longer part of your lives? What do you say to them now? Have you reached out to any of them? Have any of them reached out to you?
Are you like specifically from elementary school? Yeah, I mean, some we've crossed paths, and yeah, they're just part of my story, you know. Some relationships I used to, you know, with in terms of falling outs or just abrasive relationships, I used to blame on my addiction, and I think recovery has taught me a lot about forgiveness, and just love. Like, I don't have time to waste, you know, I'm holding resentments for people. So, you know, yeah, I'm grateful for everyone that's been a part of my story.
First of all, I would like to say thank you because we gained a lot of knowledge today, and thank you as a family that you are so open about it. My question to you, you say that Noah is your oldest child. I know you have some more children in the house. How did you explain it to your brothers, what was happening?
I'm actually glad you asked that. It's something I was kind of thinking about talking about. Just like as an older sibling, like the influence we have on our younger siblings. Like, thank God, I was so bad. I think my brothers thought I was just kind of crazy, and weren't inspired by my substance use. But I didn't, when you're in addiction, you're in such a tunnel vision that you don't really think about the harms you're causing other people and the impact you're making on your relationships with family. And, I know that I caused a lot of harm towards my brothers. And that's something that, I'm looking to make living amends for the rest of my life. But yeah, ultimately it's really important to recognize like the impact we have on our siblings. And I included my brothers with, like, when we were drinking, when the parents were out, and stuff like that. And looking back, like, it's so inappropriate. And yeah, it's just you have to be careful because you don't know who has addictive tendencies. And I'd feel super guilty if I was a catalyst for if my brothers were addicts, which thank God they're not. But that would be that'd be a regret of mine. So and obviously I have regrets, but yeah. Thank you for that question.
We've got one at the back.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, please go ahead.
Oh, hi. I actually have questions for the scientists, not for the family, if that's okay. Am I allowed to do that now?
Absolutely.
Okay. I mean, I love you guys, but I have questions for the scientists. So the last one from Toronto, I apologize, I don't remember your name, but I work in early psychosis intervention for psychotic episodes. And I just want to say, like, my understanding is that, yes, there definitely is a correlation between early use of marijuana and the prognosis of developing substance-induced psychosis, but that number has not changed over time that much, and that also the rate of teenage use of marijuana has not changed all that much over time either. Am I correct in that?
So
I also just want to say actually one more thing, because I feel like you made it sound like schizophrenia was like a bit of a death sentence. I don't know. I think, but it's not. And that schizophrenia really is you have psychosis for more than 6 months. You have the symptoms for more than 6 months, and that people live very fantastic lives with a diagnosis of schizophrenia.
Okay, so a few things. The issue of cannabis, I brought it up to bring two groups. One is the very young children, which obviously this has got nothing to do with mental health. The issue of serious overdoses. About rates, I don't know. We have maybe different numbers or reading different literature, because I obviously think that the more it's abundant in the population and more acceptable, then you'll see more kids who are getting addicted, or at least using daily. I never said that this is a death sentence, but I don't think that anybody would choose. You're calling it wonderful life. I don't think that anybody would choose to be schizophrenic, or if they had the opportunity, they would probably want to avoid it. It does have a lot of impacts on other family members, and I don't suggest to try that. So the links between drug use, including cannabis, and progression to schizophrenia, I think we have a lot of converging lines of evidence, not just from us, from Scandinavia and other countries. And I don't think that's a risk that, at least be aware of that. If you want to take it, that's great. But I don't think that. It is what's happening. Yeah, so it is what's happening. I didn't present some data that is not published yet because it's under embargo, but patients with substance use, including cannabis use, are 3 times or more likely to die within a certain time. So I may be disagreeing with that comment. I think the use is going up, and as mentioned, you go from this drug to other drugs, and again, those kids that are using it, we're not talking about adults, but kids who are not supposed to be part of that cannabis act.
Well, we've got one final question from the corner. Dina's going to have a few closing remarks, and then we'll let you go.
I just got a question for Noah. As an addict in recovery, you probably had some friends or people you knew who struggled, and they either didn't know that they were struggling, or they had the stigma of, oh, I can't go to the fellowship because it's embarrassing, it's the worst place to be. What advice would you have for somebody who has a friend or knows somebody who's in that place where they're too scared to go to the programs just because of the stigma behind addiction, and they're too embarrassed to admit it?
Well, yeah, good question. Like, that's why I'm promoting or preaching to normalize the discussion about addiction, because I remember feeling that way, and like I also remember feeling like there'd be no more fun anymore, like that's what addiction does. It's like I could be doing lethal drugs, and when I think about getting clean, it's like, oh, but then I won't be having fun, when in reality addiction wasn't fun either. So there's an analogy, or there's a cliche we say in recovery, and it's addiction is giving up everything for one thing. Is that right? No. Yes, addiction is like giving up everything for one thing, and recovery is giving up one thing for everything. And so back to your question, like I would I would just get him in touch with people that have changed their life through the fellowship. Addiction, the opposite of addiction is connection. And, when we're in isolation and when we're in addiction, we're alone in that world, regardless of how many people are physically around us. And it takes people who understand what addiction is and who have been through it themselves to really be able to like show that empathy and love someone for being an addict. And it takes that stigma away. Because being a young man or woman who's an addict, you feel ashamed and embarrassed, and it shouldn't be that way. So that's why great question.
So as we conclude tonight's program, I want to thank again our partners in putting this together, Vancouver Talmud Torah and King David High School. I want to thank our presenters who came all the way from Jerusalem, our presenter from Toronto, dear family, also the volunteers, the following volunteers: Jennifer Schechter-Bailing, Debbie Tabenkin, Carol Sachs, Shira Wachtel. Thank you all for your help. Please, if you know somebody that may benefit from continuing the conversation confidentially with the family, we left you the information on the chair. Take it, give it to them. And if you want to continue the conversation with us, you have information there as well, and very interesting additional information, good news, research that is coming out of Hebrew University. You may stay longer to continue the conversation. Have a good evening.